Hi guys,
What's up?
XP Bros here again. I'm Aaron,
I'm Nathaniel.
and we're here today to talk about Zelda 2. Yes, the typically most disliked Zelda of them all.
Most infamous.
Yes, infamous. Up on the screen here, we've got us, cool, yeah, and we've got an article written by a Mike Midwood on Zelda Dungeon, cool site. Check it out. Check him out.
Good article.
But not like that. Article is really good, and we're just here today to talk about why Zelda 2 is so disliked and why it really actually is a good game, in our opinion. So let's get started. Typically, Zelda 2 is disliked because it's old and it's archaic and it doesn't match up maybe today's modern gaming standards. You know, you gotta like really know how to actually play it.
It's older than me. It's older than me, so.
It's not older than me, but
Well,
yeah.
hey.
Okay. Shh.
We're not XP twins.
Right. So yeah, the hardness, the challenge of it is unappealing to some people. But, you know, back in the NES days, that's all you had. You know.
Ghosts and Goblins, I don't know how that game got big.
I don't know how that game got popular, honestly.
We didn't own it, and I played it just not too long ago on the Switch emulator, and about 10 minutes in, I'm like, this is the worst game
One of the
ever
worst,
made.
like big name games, third party games ever made.
Yeah, I have some of we have some of the old NES games that make it on like the hardest or even the worst game lists. And frankly, I played Ghosts and Goblins, and I'm like, how is
gotta be one of them.
it's on the hardest frequently, but how is it not on the worst frequently? Anyways,
Yeah.
not here to talk about Ghosts and Goblins.
Nope. Anyways, yeah. So Zelda 2, you know, it's hard. Sometimes 2 is cryptic. There were some NES games that were really cryptic, where you had to really think about being in the game in order to play them. You know, like think of Castlevania 2 was one of them. That was another cryptic game where you had to like kneel to do stuff, and Zelda 2, you got to cast certain spells at certain times and do this and do that. And we got stuck quite a few times.
Throwing holy water at every block in Simon's Quest?
Yeah, that kind of gets old.
That's not fun?
I mean, Simon's Quest is a fun game, but
I love it.
it's a little tedious. It's, if you're patient, and you know, we grew up on those games, so of course we're patient with them for the most part. It is a bit of a challenge, and it's a bit of a roadblock for a lot of people, and I don't blame that. But what makes it an awesome game, in my opinion, are a lot of things, honestly. There's a lot of really cool things about Zelda 2.
I love it. Just to show my bias, I love the game. It has RPG elements where you have to level up your 3 stats, so to speak, attack, life, and magic. And I loved that as a kid growing up, collecting. But it wasn't like, say, Final Fantasy 1 or Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest, if you know it as that, where it took that long to collect. But you had to collect for a while, and that added to it.
Yeah, the collecting was fun. It got a little grindy, but you don't really need to grind Zelda 2. I found later on that you don't need to hit level 8 attack by Palace number 2. You know, we used to do that just to be hardcore about it because we beat it like 20 zillion times.
That was our oldest brother, too. He was hardcore about every game. If you use fireballs in Super Mario Bros. 1, you're weak. That kind of thing.
Yeah, so, you know, we kind of went a little overboard with it, but with all the, you know, extra points and enemies, if you kill an enemy, you know, encounter every so often, you should be good. Speaking of enemy encounters, the combat system is completely different from other Zeldas. It's a side-scrolling combat system, so of course that right there is a big change. But you gotta really kind of be skilled at the game. It's a skills-based combat system that you need to get good at in order to really enjoy the game, which can be frustrating for some people.
I mean, the top-down system of Zelda 1, of course, was great, and it's a challenging game, but like Zelda 2 is the action-packed version of that. We'll get more into that later, but the combat system was challenging, and then the stuff that they would throw at you got almost Castlevania-esque, where you'd have to make a jump, but there'd be a flying horse head or something like that coming at you. And there'd be a pit below, but then there'd be this or that. It kind of got that Castlevania-esque, Ninja Gaiden-esque type feel to it.
Right, where you just jump, hit this little bubble that you can barely see, on the screen, and you end up dying
And die.
And die, yeah.
You die a lot.
Yeah, you die a lot, especially at first. Another great aspect of this game is its music. Though it can get maybe a little repetitive at points, I think the sound is really cool sounding. It really is a neat soundtrack. The palace theme is really neat.
Palace and Great Palace.
And the Great Palace at the end, the music alone in that place makes it worth getting there.
Oh, yeah.
It might not make it worth getting through it, but it makes it worth getting there.
I know when we first got there, we heard that music, and we instantly knew it's going down.
Oh, yeah, this was the last level, the last palace.
This is important. This is super epic. It's awesome. I love it to this day. Whenever I get there, I still kind of get that feeling of like, man, I made it. Something real bad is going to happen.
What we found, too, is that Zelda 2 tended to be, and this might tick off some Zelda 1, diehards.
Trigger warning?
Trigger warning. Now, I love Zelda 1, don't get me wrong. It's a great game, awesome game. Zelda 2, though, kind of feels a little more alive than Zelda 1. Zelda 2 has stuff like NPCs. The graphics are really actually colorful and really good for its time.
Some of those enemies, some of those bosses, they're creepy looking.
Yeah, you look at some of those bosses at the end of the palaces, and they're kind of creepy looking. Especially when you're younger, when you're 6 and 7, you're like, wow, this is kind of creepy.
Different towns, you had the town in the forest, for an example, looks very characteristic versus the abandoned town looks very characteristic, so on and so forth. You get these different towns with these different looks. The town, I can't remember its name. It's on the other continent in the northwest of the desert.
I don't remember what one that was.
It's real dark, though. It's
Mido, maybe?
Yeah, it's real dark. The towns are really cool as well, and I know when we used to run around the yard, me, him, and my sister used to run around the yard, and we used to play Make Pretend, and we'd make these big universes with all these different games, movies. So we'd put Mario characters and Zelda characters and Final Fantasy characters and Disney movie characters all in one universe.
Eat that MCU.
Yeah, this is when I was 4. We played in Hyrule most of the time, though. It was supposed to be in Hyrule. Sometimes we were supposed to go to the Mushroom Kingdom. But Zelda 2 is the Hyrule that we played in. That's how we envisioned Hyrule.
Right.
Zelda 2.
Yeah, we envisioned Hyrule through that. It really spurred on our imagination. It was a really kind of creative-looking game. The townspeople, you had a lot of NPCs for an NES game that wasn't top-down, that didn't just have little sprites sitting there. Now, granted, a lot of the NPCs, say the same thing, the ones that are walking around the town, populating the towns, but it was cool to see them. And you had key NPCs throughout the town that you always looked for. But yeah, the population was really neat.
Come on. I know nothing.
I know nothing, yeah.
I am error.
I am error, the famous I am error. To continue talking about it, some of the different ways to play it. Of course, you've got the NES, the original. That's how we played it. That's kind of the hardcore way to play it because there are no save points, there's no, anything. You just gotta beat the game.
And if there's a penny underneath your NES, it might just
crashes.
crash.
Yeah, the whole game goes and you lost whatever progress you made. You can save your game with a second controller like you could with Zelda 1. Push up and A on the second controller and you go to the save game screen, or you die. And you can do it that way.
You can play it on the Switch. That's a lot of fun because you have the suspend points, so on and so forth. That makes it a lot more forgiving. That makes it a little bit easier. The biggest thing with a game over is you lose your progress in a palace, or you lose your progress with your current level, to your XP for your level.
Right. Yeah.
No shameless XP bros plug.
No. Dying has its ramifications, but I don't think they're quite so severe. Some people make them out to be. Some people make dying out in Zelda 2 to sound like it's the end of the world. And you just kind of gotta retrace your steps and learn from those mistakes that you made. And, isn't that a lot like Dark Souls? And yes, not everybody likes Dark Souls, but that game got really popular for its difficulty. And yet people, talk about, belittle Zelda 2 for its difficulty for pretty much
or Simon's Quest
or other couple other NES games. There are some really crappy NES games that are just
Ghosts and Goblins
that are just not any fun or fair at all.
But so the suspended points help with that a little bit. If you're not as old school, there's a lot of fun. We played it with something called the NES Atlas. If some of you might know what the NES Atlas is, it was kind of like the granddaddy of game guides for back in its day.
Yeah.
And it told you a lot. Ironically, a couple things it didn't reveal the bosses, or it wouldn't reveal every single end game secret, but it did reveal a lot of things, extra lives, things like that.
Yeah, we use the NES Atlas. That really helps. So, I mean, if you're interested in playing Zelda 2 and you think, wow, this game's really hard, I can't do it, or if you just get stuck, obviously, go on the internet. We have the internet nowadays. We have the internet. Use a guide. There's no shame in it. It's better to enjoy, 95% of the game and not, try to go at it die hard and, die and just get stuck and drop it, because it's a really cool game, and it would be better if you played it than not.
I was playing Crystallis on the Switch, and I got admittedly a little impatient in a couple parts, and I used to have this rule where, like, if I spent 2 hours, I would use a cheat guide. That was after I loosened up from never using cheat guides almost hardly at all. I took it a little bit shorter. I shortened that 2-hour range to like 45 minutes because honestly I just thought, I only got stuck minorly like twice.
Yeah.
And it made the game well worthwhile playing. So think about doing that too.
Yeah, cheat guides, game guides. It's an NES game. It's a 30-something-year-old game, and there's no shame in. They made games differently back then.
And some of you people are looking at us in the camera like, wait, you don't use guides? You don't use cheats?
Right, and I mean, we just have this particular thing of not using game guide if we can. Because I think that brings the most enjoyment out in the game, is to experience the game raw and just original. But yeah, use a game guide. Another way to enjoy it is honestly to get good at it, envision the get good being GUD. A little bit of patience goes a long way, a little bit of time. It is a skills-based combat game where you need to learn how to actually fight the enemies. A lot of the enemies have patterns, and it's a lot about timing. You gotta time your attacks, time when the duck, time when the shield, all that type of stuff.
Or you just hide in the corner.
If anybody's beaten Zelda 2, you know what that means. Yeah, so just play it, enjoy it, have fun, get better. There is a learning curve. You do have to put a little bit of time into this game. You can't just pick it up and run through, with your head down and get through it, unless if you're good at it immediately for whatever reason.
That takes a long time.
Yeah.
Or at least a decent amount, I'd like to think.
What was really unique about Zelda 2 is that it was our first Zelda that we played. We got it from KB Toys years and years ago, and it was the first one we played. We not played Zelda 1 at all. And Zelda 2 was our first Zelda game.
It's crazy. You start with that top-down in the overworld, so to speak, but yeah, side-scrolling was our first Zelda. So the side-scrolling aspect to me, it took me a couple more games for me to think, well, they're not going to make another side-scroller, are they?
Yeah.
And, lo and behold, to this day, there's some aspects in a couple of the games where it's sort of side-scrolling.
Like Link's Awakening.
Well, as early as that, you did get a side-to-side.
When you went into in the dungeon, like when you went down steps or whatever, ladders.
But we haven't gotten a real remake. We're going to do another cool video. We're going to go over this article a little bit more and talk about why we need another Zelda 2.
Yeah. Another fun fact is that we skipped A Link to the Past. We played Zelda 2. Yeah. So we missed one of the best. I mean, we played Zelda 2. Played Zelda 1. Link's Awakening, we did play that.
Yep.
And then Ocarina of Time came out in 98. We didn't have a Super Nintendo until probably like 2000, 2001.
Something like that.
Something like that. So we played no Super Nintendo games. We did not play A Link to the Past. And that really shaped the way that we thought of not only Zelda 2, but also Ocarina of Time, which is probably why it's our favorite game, because it just blew our minds. We didn't have A Link to the Past to compare it against.
Now, I will say in defense of Zelda 2, it's the It's like the 80s action movie video game of the Zelda series.
Yeah.
By comparison, for those old Zelda games, you know, it did have the side-scrolling, jumping, high death, high action, high skill demand, where Ocarina of Time in the later 3D games got that added to it, and it was really cool because to me, it really is the action movie of the old classic Zeldas. It really is.
Yeah. Zelda 2, again, we really recommend playing it. Give it a try. Again, we're going to make another longer video more about this article here by Mike Midwood. And there are other articles like it. We kind of felt like we had to quote this article, cite this article, just because this gave me the original idea. But there are a lot of articles like this. If you talk about Zelda 2 being an okay or good game, you're going to, overlap with a whole bunch of people's opinions on YouTube, and you're going to overlap with a bunch of other authors who wrote articles like this one here.
But if you love a game, why not hear it twice?
Right, yeah. Why not talk about it more? Zelda 2 overall is a really imaginative game, I think. I think it's really cool. The overworld map, and then you run into encounters, you fight through them, and that makes it kind of harrowing because if you're low on health, it's really difficult. It's really fun. It's skill-based combat, great NPCs, RPG elements, and in all honesty, one of the best parts of Zelda 2 is that really awesome title screen.
Yeah, there are a lot of awesome Zelda title screens.
Yeah.
Obviously, most of I can't think of a bad one.
Right.
But I love the Zelda 2 title screen because whenever I would bring out my NES, and then later on, of course, I had the Game Boy Advance Zelda 2, and now it's on the Switch, and people with emulators. Whenever I would bring out the NES, though, and I clean it out, and I go to play Zelda 2, I'd pop it in and hit that power button, and the music would just start playing, and I'm like,
You're about to get into a magical experience with, Zelda 2 and the title screen. It is just heroic. Zelda 1 is also heroic, yes, but Link, I kind of feel like that you really take on the role of Link in Zelda 2, and you really play as him, and you feel like you are him. And that really can, spur on that imagination. So overall, of course, we highly recommend, thumbs up, thumbs way up, Zelda 2. It's a fun game. Give it some time. Maybe it's not your cup of tea, but we really liked it growing up. We still love it. I'm playing through it again. But just enjoy it. Have fun.
That's about all we have right now until our next video where we will discuss why we need another side-scrolling Zelda 2 type Zelda, honestly.
Until then, we'll catch you guys later. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. We really appreciate all of you guys being here, and we really hope you tune in for our next video. We'll try to make them a little bit more close together. But until then, peace.
Get some XP.
And level up.